can pass it on to Lorna.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christina.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
That was a great presentation, great panel, and very informative. And it certainly the comment about limousine tenders at the end made me think of Exuma, the yacht that was in Monaco earlier this year, with the amazing what looked like a Jeep, but actually it functions equally well on the sea or on land. And there were some great shots of the Exuma car/stroke tender actually going into some very inhospitable parts of the world. So that was very interesting on the ownership experience. And we're going to move right on now to our next panel, which is led by Pandora Mather-Lees, and we're going to hear from the panelists about some of the pitfalls of having expensive fine art on board as part of your interiors. So over to you, Pandora. It's all on mute, I think.
So sorry, I thought Lorna had unmuted me. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Andrew. My name is Pandora Mather-Lees of artonsuperyachts.com, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this session and our panelists this afternoon. So the title of the session is Picasso on Board: What can go wrong, and are you insured, and what are the liabilities? I think it's no secret now to anyone in the industry that vessels over 40 meters will have significant artworks on board. We have seen reports of vessels such as Topaz and Eclipse and Dar and Landus Air, and Galactica Star has a fantastic program as well. So art portfolios are now increasingly being brought onto these vessels, and they're getting bigger so they can accommodate more pieces. And we have to now think of the owner as art collector, the super yacht owner as an art collector for the next 40 minutes, and to look at some of the considerations with bringing their pieces on board, and especially special feature pieces, because they do like to compete with other owners and also to distinguish themselves when they've had perhaps the same interior designer as perhaps another owner. So what we're going to be doing later is running through a little scenario with you, rather than just sort of firing questions randomly. We're going to tie this into a scenario of a super yacht owner and their art collection. But before we do that, I'm now going to introduce our panelists to you. So could we start please with you, Victoria? Victoria Stupina is a client of mine in Russia, and we work closely together, and she runs Art Consul. She's an art advisor. Victoria, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Hello, everyone. Hello, delegates and the panelists. It's a pleasure to be in such a professional group of people today. Thank you so much. I've been running my advisory company called Art Consul for 13 years and 15 years in art consulting. The Art Consul is the only art advisory, official art advisor in Russia for the largest private banks and family offices. We deal with all kinds of issues that are related to owning the art pieces, from logistics to collection management, like the whole set of services of a collection management, and also art as an alternative asset class, and which leads to another service, which is a tangible asset management for the clients. So that's, and we've been working with Pandora for quite a long time, and that's a very interesting collaboration.
Great, thank you, Victoria. And now Tillman, if I could move on to you, Tillman of Yacht Art Management in Hamburg. We've also been working together for some years. Tillman, could you introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, sure, thank you. Basically, I'm an art advisor as well, but in this case, I'm more focused on the nail-to-nail process. So what we do is called Yacht Art Management. Me and my partner Astor Salcedo are experienced in all kinds of parts, from nail to nail artwork, putting it on a boat. Especially educated as an architect. This is my key knowledge related to art, obviously, which is based on our private museum, which is in Hanover. My grandfather used to be an important art collector, so that's why we know how museum standards should look like. I'm based in Hamburg, which is nearby some of the major shipyards, as you know. So we are happy to cooperate with the shipyards itself, but mainly with the client representatives and yacht designers.
Thank you, Tilman. And now I would like to come on to our sponsor and thank our sponsors, Liberty Global, for helping us with this panel. And I'm going to hand over to Mike Burl, who is Head of Marine and Fine Art at Liberty Global. Mike, could I ask you, after you have introduced yourself, perhaps then you could roll straight into your introduction, because Mike is going to set the scene for this afternoon with the insurance aspect and put us in context. Thank you, Mike.
Sure, thanks, Pandora. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Mike Burl. I'm Head of Marine at Liberty Specialty Markets, and also the Global Head of Fine Art and Species team across the planet. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to the panel, a panel that I'm very much looking forward to, because I think it's fair to say that art is just so interesting. Every time you talk about any aspect of artwork, it kind of gets people going, and so really looking forward to it. And I'll be very quick in my introduction, if I may. But why does it get us interested? Because of the nature of the artwork. It could be a painting, a sculpture, a piece of graffiti, days, new or old, in great shape or on its last legs. It's just simply fascinating. It's history in the making, and with my knowledge, I'm literally scratching the surface of what it's really like to be a dealer, a curator, or a mega collector. I don't profess to know a great deal about artists, paint, canvas, but what I do know, it inspires such opinion and a great deal of interest. And I'm incredibly fortunate to be involved in fine art and fine art insurance, because it's just so interesting. But hang on, Mike, you're in insurance. Why is that? Why is that so interesting? Well, because it enables us to broaden our horizons, and in this class or sector, along with other classes of business that we write within the marine division, and that includes sometimes the super yacht itself, which again is a fascinating subject, can take you to far-flung places to meet such wonderful people and hopefully make a difference. At Liberty Specialty Markets, we have a large book of fine art insurance written by our global teams across here in the UK, in Europe, or our team in the US. And it's fair to say it's mainly on the land. It's mainly on land, on display, in transit, for sale, or in storage. And a stat that always foxes me is that it's probably less than it. Less than 1% of all artwork is on show to the public, because most of it's locked away in storage. And even during 2020, I'm sure a lot more of it has been people just unable to see it because of sadly, the museums, galleries, dealers have been closed too. But when it is viewed in a private home, museum, gallery, or an exhibition at a blockbuster venue, that's when we, as insurers, get involved advising our clients what the best practice is to ensure that the artwork is safe and well protected, and ensuring the pieces just in case something unfortunate happens. And that can literally be anything from earthquake damage, a leak, water damage, a road traffic accident, or malicious damage, to name but a few. And the same goes for when artwork goes on the water. And we're seeing lots and lots more inquiries to cover art, large or small, whilst on board yachts. It's fascinating, to the extent that last year in Monaco, whilst running, well, more like a brisk walk to be fair, around Nice Harbour, having a good look inside each and every vessel just to see what was inside and whether we at Liberty were covering it or not. But I'm sure we'll come into the more intricate parts of the insurance side during the scenario with Pandora. But as Victoria said on our catch-up call not so long ago, prepping for this panel, was we're going to see more and more collectors moving their collections to other places, including yachts, as the events of COVID have changed people's habits. For example, instead of staying in a hotel, which, to be fair, we all know it's more and more difficult to stay in one of those these days, it may well be longer in the holiday retreat, second home, or indeed an extended stay on the yacht, or even maybe a new yacht. Who knows? But all that needs decoration, and that's where we step in as fine art insurers to ensure you can do that safely and you know you're well protected. But what I do know, in 28 years of being a fine art underwriter, the greater risk of art happens when it starts to move on the land or on the water. So let's get into the scenario, and Pandora, it's over to you.
Thank you, Mike. And indeed, it is quite a shame that so much art is hidden away in storage. And so, you know, it's just one of those facts that we have in the fine art world. It's a market that's worth something like $67 billion annually, so it is significant. So now I would like to turn to our scenario, which we have prepared for you today. We have a significant art collector in Russia who is in Moscow, and he is a client of Victoria Stupina's. The client has a vessel built in Hamburg, and he wants, or pretty much finished in Hamburg, and he's now looking to fit it out, and he wants to bring a portfolio of art on board to the vessel. So we have a very interesting shopping list for you, and we joke about shopping lists in the art world, but every super yacht pretty much needs to have a Lucio Fontana, and our owner is no different. So we will be shipping a Fontana piece from the south of France. And we will be also shipping to Liechtenstein works of art from a store of a logistics company in Paris. Then we also have 3 Andy Warhol pieces, which are very significant and important, which will be coming from his house in London. Then we will also have, he has selected a beautiful crystal sculpture, rather like the one behind me here, 142 kilograms, which he has purchased from Artsio Gallery in the Czech Republic and will be looking to bring on board. He will also be bringing a very important antique map, which is in a special casing with special humidity and climate protection, and a number of decorative arts from his house in Moscow. So there's going to be quite a lot of pieces coming on board. They all need insurances, they all need customs clearance, they need logistics, management, and installation. So Victoria, I would like to pose the first question to you, if I might. This might seem a little bit far-fetched to some people, but can you please tell us how realistic is this scenario, and what are the issues that you face as an art advisor to clients such as this, and what are the complexities of really handling this type of project and the communications that might be involved?
Thank you, Pandora. That's actually a great case to study, I think. I totally agree with Michael when you said that the greatest risks come when art starts moving. However, surprisingly enough, there is also a greatest risk when it comes to a human factor. And that human factor is what we have to deal with when we start to communicate with the team of all the parties involved in the client's property and asset management. We consider that the client who owns an important collection, like the one that we have in that case that we're studying now, the client usually has a family office or a certain structure that is managing his assets, including art. even though that it is not so common for the Russian rich people to consider art as an asset class, since it does not generate an income. However, it is a tangible asset, and because there is a certain protocol, how you manage art in the portfolio of your client, and it's a lot of very important positions to keep in mind when you do that. So we have to set up the communication between all the parties. And that could be, in many cases, it can be a CFO, it can be an executive assistant, it can be a personal assistant, a corporate lawyer, a chief accountant. And in most of the cases, art, and we know that art takes a completely different approach and a set of skills to manage. These people usually do not have, they're not qualified to deal with that. And we have to face that the problem of making them treat art as something that is worth a very special attention. And this is the first challenge that we have to deal with. And this is exactly because there's a lot of parties involved. And usually there is no one single a collection manager or an advisor or any kind of professional who is in charge for the whole art collection in all locations. There's usually a lot of different people in every location. That is, it can be a PA in Paris, it can be a curator in Moscow, it can be a lawyer in London, and you have to build the communication between all these people. And this is why it is crucial to set up the one very solid and very clear structure of, I would even say, a protocol of managing art, especially when it starts moving to yacht, because it is a very risky and a very complicated process. It is the way more complicated than just sending art to the exhibition on show to another city. It is a different type of risks. There's different type of securities and all kinds of things that come with that. So I believe that this is the communication and the setting up a single structure for the all parties. That's the most important part of the process to start with.
Thank you, Victoria. Indeed it is, and that complexity is enhanced when we're looking at taking these objects on board a vessel, and the number of companies and individuals around the world very often that can be involved in a build of a yacht. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Tilman. So Tilman, this is not such a surprising scenario to you, because Yacht Art Management handles these sorts of projects and you've been working together well. And you have a number of stages by which you enact this protocol that Victoria is talking about. Could you enlighten us a little bit about how you work and how that plays out?
Sure, I'm happy to. Now, just for your general understanding, so as I said, I'm not, in this case, I'm not the typical art advisor. I'm not choosing artworks. Maybe it's more on to you, Victoria. And I'm also like working with many other companies who are experienced and professional in their field. So we try to identify the best persons, the best companies, the best knowledge, combine everything. So we can do, like, as I said, the yacht art management, the total full service about from nail to nail, which I said, and which might be important for Michael, that we do we certify the process. So we try to minimize the whole risk, to avoid damages, which is not happening on board, because of you, Pandora, and your training skills. It's the whole transport, the whole procedure. And just to get you all basic understanding how complex this situation is, we don't have time to go into detail, but I give you some bullet points that structure the process, which gives you a basic understanding how complex this situation is. So the first stage, we call it project management. It starts just simply with the right of ownership. It's this piece of art or this sculpture, does it really belongs to the owner or to a company, which makes a big difference also if we just export a piece of art, which is not owner of this, like the right ownership, obviously. So the next bullet point is custom and tax, which is very complex with international customs and tax regulations, financial risks, of course, local culture, property protection laws, and so on, money laundering laws. Then we have the restitution, provenance, national laws, which, as Victoria said, are very complex, very different in each single country. So this is still a starting point. So we talk about the value appraisals, the valuation. What kind of valuation is it? Is it the replacement value or the market value? The fair value is called. Also a big difference, at least if there is any damage in future. We have to talk about status report and authenticity again, like who is doing this qualified reports? Are they like done by property, like professional restorers? The condition, is it all like written down in a proper report? And then we come to the insurance, of course, because it's not usually, out of our experience, even if the yacht, of course, has an overall insurance package, usually the single objects which are like more expensive than a normal artwork, usually we try to get a separate insurance for it. So maybe Michael, you can tell us something about it later. So still the project management. Now we come to the project development, the next stage. As I said, I'm an architect. So in this case, I'm happy to be involved in a very early stage to create a proper space on board, working with the architects, designers, the shipyards on an early stage. Then we have to think about, very important, of course, fire protection, which is not fire itself, as you know, so it's more like smoke, water, sprinklers. This will cause different and heavy problems. As well as static. So the whole engineering, let's assume we have to protect an artwork within 100% UV glass. They weigh up to 300 kilograms, which is a serious problem if you want to move them to avoid like humidity behind it. Then of course we have to deal with sunlight. It's an own topic. We can go deep into it next time. Air conditioning, obviously, to avoid condensation water, dry cracks, strong temperature, obviously an issue on sea. Vibrations also a big issue. Constant vibration, the machine must be taken into account. So it's still project development. So find us is a problem. Security, we have to think about if this artwork is connected to a proper security system. The suspension device to avoid nails, screws, glues. You don't want to damage very expensive surfaces, so you have to think about a proper installation system in the planning process. So then we come to stage 3, which is so-called technical implementation. Now we get more into the curation. Where are you hanging a painting? Yeah, like this is more out of the art perspective. You have to prepare all documents for the export and import, written in English. This case, packaging is a big problem. I mean, usually you have a climate box. Where do you want to store it once it's hanged? They're quite expensive. You have to think about proper transport. Just a few companies out there are able to transport international with the proper security, with proper cars and vehicles. So this has to be a good company. Duty free, obviously, also a big issue in the warehouse. Everything should be prepared, especially when it comes to framing. Usually you have to change the frame, the glass sometimes, the protection, and you can't unframe a painting with, so it should be within the tax-free, duty-free area to avoid problems. The transfer on board is problems. The few meters is usually the most dangerous one when it's stressed on board. So everything comes to a point, just usually short on time. The hanging system, as I said, maintenance, of course. So you have to take care about all the process once it's done. And Pandora, you can tell us also. So, and then the fourth point, security, protection, sounds normal, but theft is a problem. Carelessness, of course, you have to train the crew. Training itself, I mean, everybody, even the captain, has to know what he's dealing with. And last but not least, but you have to think about storage when it comes to a refurbishment, maybe comes to maintenance. So you have to take control about every single step. Where is the package material? What happens when it comes to the refit? Then you have to prepare all kind of individual services required by the family offices usually. And then you have the whole package from all parts of steps from nail to nail. And we try it to just give it with one voice. So it's always good to deal with one people, one company, just the ones you are experienced, good experience. So, and yeah, this is why we are lucky being in Hamburg. So, because it's a niche, but when it's a big problem, and people are always surprised how complicated this process could be. Andorra, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Tilman. Have you finished?
So far, yes.
We have project management and project development, and then the technical implementation. So that's quite a lot to handle. And then perhaps I should now introduce myself at this point, because this is where Tilman would be bringing me in to train the crew and anyone around in the industry at the yard or the yacht management company, because I am a super yacht art consultant and I train captains and crew in these risks. And we look at three areas really, which is art appreciation, art management, and then the art export risks. And we're particularly focusing at the moment on the new cultural goods regulation about bringing decorative arts and any cultural goods into and out of and back into EU borders. So this is where also Tilman and I might work together to assist with the collections management system on board and to make sure that all the documentation is there and that everyone knows what everyone is doing and that there is continuity, because artworks come and go and also crew come and go. So it's quite important to have that continuity. But this huge portfolio needs ensuring, and it is coming from disparate places. And so at this point, I would like to ask Mike how he would help Victoria and Tilman manage this client with the insurance of the art on board, particularly in light of this aspect. Mike, we have had quite an interesting question, which perhaps I will pose to you now as well, and perhaps you can answer that afterwards. It's from Richard Felipez, super yacht insurance trader and based in Gibraltar. And he says he had a case recently on a vessel where an art collection on board was actually short of the total yacht value. He ended up looking at 3 policies, one for the hull and machinery, the P&I, and then a separate one for the art collection. Is this normal, or can it all be incorporated into one policy under the hull? Perhaps that's the future area of product development for you, Mike. Over to you.
Thanks. Before I answer that question, as best as I possibly can, I think Tilman brings up, you know, what's involved, the sheer range of what's involved to protect. And this is just the artwork, not the vessel itself, the maintenance of the vessel itself, but the artwork itself, about how many risk factors, we'd call them risk factors, are involved in making sure that nothing bad does happen. And in respect to the question, I was going to talk about underinsurance and making sure that the client, with the help of their broker, and the insurance broker is really, really important in this, is tying the coverages together, because there is the vessel itself, and generally with yacht insurance, most of the time it's not a single insurance policy, it's part of a bigger collection with the homes and the contents and the home itself, even the contents, the artwork, maybe some auto and the helicopter, the plane, except in certain cases. It's so important before we go into cover itself that the risk factors are taken into account, but also the values, and ensuring that every single piece of artwork or interest, certainly has an interest to that owner. And I think we're talking about here of artwork coming from different parts of the world and coming in order to ensure that the owner needs to have an insurable interest, needs to have that kind of title or ownership, or certainly under on consignment in their care, custody and control. And when it comes to underinsurance, most insurance policies, or most insurers and insurance brokers working together, will ensure that the limits are sufficient. But the accumulation of risk can happen sometimes. We've got 3 or 4 pieces coming from 3 or 4 different places, all accumulating in one place. So again, really, really important to make sure that if it's all in one place, it's all covered, and there isn't a certain limit. There's 100 million pounds or euros in one location, and the policy limit is 50 million euros. Then that's the policy limit. So again, ensuring, I think we touched on it, communication and engagement. We appreciate that there are so many people involved that need to work together to ensure that a collection is safe and is well managed. And in this instance, we've got to make sure, we must make sure that the client is fully protected, not just for something to go wrong, but ensure that it's peace of mind and it's well protected before something does go wrong. And I think that's really, really, really important. At the moment, it's fair to say that most insurance policies are separate to each other. You've got the hull and machinery. A P&I policy may be as a separate section in that hull and machinery, or might be separate. And then you've got the art collection, whilst it's on board the vessel, is generally in a separate section. But who knows? Great question. So, well, actually in the future, where is the barrier of not having that all under one policy as a section A, B, C, 1, 2 or 3, like that? So absolutely. But when it comes to from the insurance side of things, yeah, let's make sure things are covered. Let's make sure that the actual incidents that can go wrong are also covered. It's not about the value necessarily, about is water damage cover. Tillman, you talked about vibration and making sure the fixtures of that artwork, however valuable that artwork is, that something doesn't go wrong and it stays on the wall, or it stays on the table because it's got wax attaching it to the table, to ensure that in a bit of heavy weather or a knock or an accidental trip, that artwork doesn't suffer any damage. So I think it's really, really important. It's fascinating listening to you, Tillman. I hope your order book is jam-packed full, because the advice you're giving us is fantastic, and goes into a whole wealth of kind of protocol, as you mentioned, Victoria, a list of things to look out for and to make sure are in order. So yeah, from an insurance point of view, before things go wrong, let's make sure we've got everything in order to keep things safe.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, indeed. The fact that title insurance is a key aspect to us in the art world. When you're selling a piece of art, do you, you're buying a piece of art, do you know that the person selling it actually owns it? Because we have had a number of different cases of fraud. And then additionally, of course, you can insure it as much as you like, as you say, Mike, but every work of art is unique. And if it's lost forever. So it's a loss to our cultural heritage, as well as financial loss to the owner, which they won't want. So moving forward with our scenario, Victoria, we've just been informed that the client has changed his mind. That never happens, does it? The client has changed his mind, and after everything has been arranged, he has now decided to not have a number of certain pieces which now have to be removed and shipped back, and he wants some additional pieces to come aboard. The whole thing's gone topsy-turvy, and it's quite far down the line with the project. How often does this sort of thing happen, and what are the issues of dealing with some of these owners? Could you enlighten us a little bit?
Sure. Well, first of all, I again completely agree with all my colleagues, panelists, about all of those risky parts of the process that has to be considered at the beginning. And thinking of a certain specific behavior of the clients, I can say, first of all, that it is probably common for almost all the rich people to change the mind the last minute because they can. It's simple. I just can. And because they can afford it, it is very simple. So they can do it at any cost. However, if we talk about that particular case and the Russian, say, ultra high net worth individuals, it is very, in most of the cases from my practice, first of all, when there is a structure that we deal with, let's say a family office that is managing the whole process, it is a very directive type of management. So usually the client knows the best way to do everything. And it is a little bit a lack of trust to the outsource, and they try to first rely on in-house services and the structure that they have. However, that in-house structure is usually not really qualified to deal with art, as I mentioned before. So in that case, of course, the client can change his mind how many times he wants, as many times as he wants. But what we have to also remind the client about is that there is a certain, the risks has to be considered really seriously. There is a lack of risk analysis for the Russian clients, unfortunately, when it comes to art. It is a very emotional, which is very common for Russians, very emotional. Also, for us as a service providers, we have to keep in mind that there could be a certain pieces that we may not even qualified as classified as a valuable asset or a valuable piece, but it can have a significant emotional value for a client. And then also we have to always get into that very intimate and direct communication about all the aspects of the process. Like I said, there is a very specific thing also about the Russian clients, the Russian rich people. Sometimes they are more price oriented against the value. So you have to really explain what are the benefits that the client will get from your services, and why is that extremely important compared to the in-house services that he's been using for years. But maybe the level of the services is not equal to the art that he's going to move to his yacht. And also there can be even a tender between the services providers. Let's say you come to a client and you say that this logistic company is a very reputable provider of the services, and we have to deal with it. We strongly recommend to deal with that company in particular. But the client may say, okay, you know what, why don't we have a tender then in that case? And that we also have to be very flexible with this kind of issues. However, and also a little bit of bureaucracy that you can't get away without it, because there's a lot of coordination between all the parties involved, as I mentioned before. But once you build that trust with the client, once you go through all the stages and you show your professionalism and that you are protecting the best interests of your client, then the Russian client is very, very loyal, and then your collaboration can be very pleasant and fruitful. So that's a little tip from the inside.
Thank you, Victoria. That's really, really helpful. We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm just going to see if we've got any additional Q&As here, but please do. Mike Taylor-West. Hi, Mike, from La Playa Marine. I know that we've spoken many times, and I know that you've had quite a few issues with valuables on board. So he says, following on from my previous insurance market update to this audience, the reduced H&M capacity as a result of the market reform means that H&M insurers, particularly of larger yachts, will not wish to use up their H&M capacity on the art collection. Good point. So separate art on board placement is becoming the new normal, and specialist brokers and insurers are few but available. So he's saying good sessions. I think he's making a comment there, Mike, very much so. Just before we wrap up, I might just turn back to Tilman, just to finish off with you, Tilman. Perhaps you could give us an example of something that has gone very wrong on board a vessel. I know we've got many examples that you and I have discussed, but perhaps just tell us one example to finish off with so that we can sort of put all this into context with specifics.
I mean, my business life is full of stories, some good ones. It's hard to talk about it, obviously, but our business has started with a key experience, and we had to. So I was involved with my friend Astor to be part of a problem, and they wanted to install a very large and very expensive artwork on board. And besides, it was really expensive and really large. They sent us an email and said, well, look, can we turn the piece 90 degrees to put it horizontal, which is for an art expert hard to digest. But it turned out the real problems weren't the way to install it. So it was like how to protect the value of the artwork. And I felt really motivated to tell the owner, look, you're having a very special piece of art, and you're in your lifetime just one of many other owners. So you have to take care about this artwork for longer than your lifetime. And then it turned out that we have to protect it against UV light and all bullet points I've just mentioned. And it turned out into a real problem. But for every single problem, we found solutions. So it turned out well at the end. But I think the owner learned his lesson. And maybe a smaller little story. So last time when I went to a bigger boat, I was really sensitive touching a Chinese porcelain vase, and the steward saw it. I was almost touching it, and he said, "Well, look, don't worry. We glued it with super glue on the table, so nothing will happen." But this is obviously not what a vase should be installed like.
Not at all. Indeed, thank you, Tilman, for that final piece of interesting aspect as to what can happen on board. And of course, you know, with artwork, if it is still in copyright and it's a contemporary piece, a very modern piece, you are risking breaking copyright law. And just because you own a piece of art does not mean what you can do what you like with it. So turning it on its side or tampering with it or cutting it or whatever will infringe the moral rights of the artist themselves. So it's a punishable offence along with many others. But at that point, I would like to thank all our panelists because we're out of time. Victoria Stupina of Art Consul, Tilman Kriesel of Yacht Art Management, and our sponsors, Liberty Global and Mike Burl. Thank you very, very much for your contributions today.
Thank you,
Yes,
Pandora.
Pleasure.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pandora and panel. Apologies for the slightly patchy video quality and sound quality on some of that last session, but a great session nonetheless. Thank you very much. Now, we can do, we've got one more session on the regulatory side of things, and then you'll be rewarded with a tea break. So I'm going to pass you swiftly on now to Anthony Galeo, who's going to moderate a panel on flag state, port state control, and